Thank you, Andy, so much for coming down. It's really wonderful to have you here in person.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
And I just found out we actually lived in the same dorm in college, just a few years apart. So it's been almost a year since you took over from Jeff as CEO of Amazon, and it's been a year of firsts. The first stock split since the dot-com boom, the first vote to unionize an Amazon warehouse, your first Bloomberg Technology conference. Thank you. I want to start with a quick report card.
In February 2021, Jeff Bezos shocked the world by announcing plans to step down as Amazon's CEO. A few months later, he passed the reins to Andy Jassy, his longtime top lieutenant, the architect of one of the company's biggest profit engines, Amazon Web Services. Bezos has stayed on as executive chair, leaving Jassy to navigate a critical inflection point in Amazon's history. How does the company manage market turmoil, rising inflation, and regulatory scrutiny, and a push by some warehouse workers to unionize, all while keeping customers coming back? Joining me on this edition of Bloomberg Studio 1.0, Amazon's second CEO, Andy Jassy. He joined us from our flagship Bloomberg Technology Summit in San Francisco.
I'd like you to grade your view of Amazon's performance, and we've got time later to really dig in. But quickly, how would you grade Amazon's performance over the last year with customers?
Well, I think I'm not sure I'm the right person to grade myself during the year or not, but I'll give you my take. I think with respect to customers, I think we've done a lot of good. And I think if you look at during the pandemic, which really has extended till the early part of this year, so much of the PPE and food and essential items and people equipping their home offices were bought from Amazon, and to scale the way we needed to. Remember, in 2020, we grew 39% year over year on a $245 billion revenue run rate. I mean, it's unprecedented. It's never happened before, but it was really hard to do that, and we had to take the really big footprint, fulfillment center footprint we built the first 25 years of Amazon and doubled it in 24 months. We built out that transportation network in just a couple of years. We nearly doubled the size of our workforce during that time. And I think you saw it in other businesses. AWS is a really big part of helping companies and governments have business continuity during the pandemic. And so many companies and organizations in the last year made the strategic decision that they were going to stop running their own infrastructure technology and disproportionately chose AWS to help them move to the cloud. And we've spent a lot of time helping them make that transformation.
So what about investors? I mean, the stock is down significantly from a peak last year. Yeah. Obviously, there's broader market turmoil.
Yeah, I think, for investors or financially, I'd say it's mixed. I think we have some businesses that are growing really strongly. If you look at AWS, in 2021 grew 37% year over year. It's on a $74 billion revenue run rate business, which is pretty unusual growth. And we grew 58% year over year in our advertising business. It's a $32 billion revenue run rate business. So some businesses growing really strongly. And, we've continued to grow in our retail business despite pretty crazy comparables during 2020. But I think the real challenge for us there is on the cost side. And there have been several things that have happened, some of which are more controllable than others. I think the part that's less controllable is really around inflation. And I think we thought that inflation would start to attenuate in 2022. And with the war in Ukraine, it just went the other way and has significantly accelerated. And so the cost of trucking and line haul and ocean and air and fuel has just substantially gone up. And I think that will attenuate at some point. No one knows how long that'll take. I think the more controllable areas for us are really around fulfillment center capacity and productivity. It was taking about 24 months to build new fulfillment centers during the pandemic. And so we had to make decisions, in mid-2020 and early 2021 on how much demand we were going to plan for. And so, we end up with more capacity than we need right now. And there's a number of things that we're working on. We've stopped building on properties where we don't need it yet, and we've let a number of leases lapse, and not a small number, of both those things. We've had a lot of occasions in our history where we've worked on productivity and made improvements, and We have a lot of clearly defined initiatives, and I'm confident we're going to get back to the right level of profitability.
You are going to sublease 30 million square feet of space. Is there a mistake in the execution there because of the overbuilding?
Again, because you have to make these decisions 2 years in advance. And again, if you put yourself back in 2020, where we were growing 39% year over year on a $245 billion revenue run rate, it's very hard to know what's the right amount to build, and you have to make a decision. And we made the decision to err on the side of our consumers and sellers.
Now, how would you grade Amazon's performance with employees, your colleagues? There has been some high-profile turnover.
Yeah, I think that when I started in this gig, we had just created a new leadership principle to strive to be Earth's best employer. And I think we spent a lot of time trying to think through what that really means. It's broad, and I think we've made a fair bit of progress, but it's still early, in my opinion. But I still think there are many areas that we can keep improving. And I think, the first one I'd mention is safety. I think that, in our fulfillment centers, that is the top priority. And when you get into the details and the numbers, and outside of all the spin of it all, we're about average there, but we're not trying to be average. We want to be the best in the industry and the best in the world at it, and that's a high priority and an area that I'm passionate about and the team is passionate about. And I think we have a lot of work we can do to make our employees' everyday lives easier. And we've identified kind of a top 100 list of areas that we can be better at, that we are just metronomically stepping through. And so we've made a lot of progress, but we have a lot of work to do still.
Elon Musk just came out saying he has a super bad feeling about the economy, Tesla laying off 10% of his staff. Jamie Dimon says he's preparing for an economic hurricane. The World Bank just slashed its forecast for global growth. How do you feel about the economic climate?
Well, I wasn't planning on giving any guidance today.
Please.
But
super bad or super bad?
I think there's some things as it relates to Amazon that are useful to remember. I think the first piece is, remember that 85% of the worldwide retail market segment share is offline. And if you believe that that equation is going to flip at some point, which we do, I think it will flip over a long period of time. If you look at different downturns, should we have one at some point? And we've been through a few, obviously, in the 25 years that I've been at Amazon. Customers change their habits. And so, I also think there's, those two reasons, those two factors give me some optimism that even if we have a downturn, that we have the potential to still grow. We have a roadmap that's, probably 3 to 5 years long, and we're going to continue to invent, we're going to continue to be insurgent, and we have a lot of work to do to get to where we think we ultimately can get for customers.
Now, when it comes to the stock, as I mentioned, it has fallen significantly. Do you think investors are missing something, or has tech just been overvalued? And this also, of course, matters to employees who are significantly paid in stock.
Well, look, I haven't been at Amazon for 25 years. I arrived at the company 3 weeks before we went public. I have never tried to predict what the stock's going to do, and any time I've tried to a little bit, I've been wrong. So, I think it's pretty hard to predict what it's going to be in any short period of time. I do really believe that Benjamin Graham maxim that in the short term the stock market tends to be a voting machine, in the long term it tends to be a weighing machine. And I think if we've been through a lot of points in 25 years of being at Amazon where the macro factors are off and stocks are down, our stock is down, but you can't really control that. We have a concept we talk about a lot at Amazon, inputs and outputs. And the ultimate output for a company is share price, and then other big outputs are free cash flow or profit or revenue. You can't really manage the outputs. You have to manage at the input level, and that's where we spend all our time. And so if you do the right things for the business long term, things tend to work out. I think we've had very good returns for investors, and I expect that to be true again.
Do you see Amazon's strategy as fundamentally different from Netflix and Disney, and if so, how? what are the moonshots at Amazon that are capturing most of your time and attention? What is going to define the next era of Amazon? I mean, is it Astro the home robot, or is it something else?
Well, we have a unique way that we look at big new investments. And I'm not sure it's right or wrong. It just happens to be our way. And we ask ourselves when we're considering something 4 questions. We ask, if it's successful, can it be big and move the needle at Amazon? Is it being well served today? Do we have a differentiated approach? And do we have competence there? And if not, can we acquire quickly? If we like the answer to those questions, we'll go pursue it with a single-threaded team that isn't distracted by the rest of the business. And sometimes that leads to innovation and investments that seem pretty obvious. Like, when I got to the company, it was a books-only retailer, and then we expanded to music and video and electronics and toys. That seemed obvious to people. Other times, that process does not lead to investments that seem obvious to people. I mean, AWS was something that people externally and internally thought was a little bit nutty at the time. But just imagine what Amazon would be today without AWS. And I think that you see the same thing here. There are so many significant investments we're making that I'm excited about. I'm going to have to constrain myself to a few. But I'm really excited about what we're doing in the Prime Video space. I think we're clearly on the right track there and building a significant business.
That's interesting because Netflix also just announced some layoffs, first subscriber loss in a decade, Disney cutting back on costs. Do you see Amazon's strategy as fundamentally different from Netflix and Disney, and if so, how?
Well, we're very bullish on it, and remember, all the models are a little bit different, but for Prime Video, we have 200 million plus Prime subscribers who are, get that entertainment for free by being part of Prime, and so we have a little bit different pricing model than some of the others, but I'm incredibly encouraged by what we have coming. If you look, we launched this show Reacher earlier in the year. It was a huge hit. We had the new Maisel season. We just launched the new Boys season, which is off to a great start.
Are you a big Boys fan?
I am a big Boys fan.
Is Amazon bought?
It's very good. Of course, we have Lord of the Rings coming up, in September, and Thursday Night Football. So I'm very bullish about it. We also, we're excited about what we've done with MGM. I think some of the assets there will go very well with the rest of what we're doing entertainment-wise. And so if you look at Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount and Starz and Global, they're building really significant subscription businesses. So I'm very bullish about that business. I'm optimistic that we have a chance to build a significant grocery business, which is early stages for us. I am excited about Kuiper, which is our low Earth orbit satellite that we're building. You got to remember there are 300 to 400 million people in the world who have limited to no internet connectivity. Just think about how different the world is when you don't have that type of connectivity. And so I think that's a really significant opportunity that has some AWS characteristics to it. I continue to be very optimistic about Alexa, building the world's best personal assistant. We have 200 million endpoints already that are using Alexa. We're clearly onto something there. And then our autonomous driving, ride-hailing service in Zoox that we're building here in the Bay Area. I just think with the way auto consumption is evolving, I think that also has a chance to be a really significant business. Now, I don't know if all of them are going to be successful, but if any one of them becomes the 4th pillar for us on top of Marketplace and Prime and AWS, we're a completely different company, just like we were when AWS became successful. So I think they're very worthwhile investments and bets, and I'm optimistic about them.
You didn't mention Astro, obviously, though, powered
you
by
mentioned
Alexa.
Astro, yeah.
But our home robot's going to be zooming around. I don't yet.
Okay.
Where is it?
Giddy up.
It's not really widely available for sale. What's the status?
I'll help you get one.
Okay. Thank you. Everyone's very curious about Jeff's role these days, what kind of executive chair he really is. He said when he left that he'd focus his attention and energies on initiatives that he really cares about at Amazon, but from the outside it looks like he's really focusing on philanthropy, he's focusing on space. What kind of an executive chairman is he?
Well, Jeff is always going to be involved, and he has, I feel very lucky to have been at Amazon for 25 years. And I feel very lucky to have worked directly for Jeff for 20 of them. And we have a really close relationship and have for a long time, and I think we share a lot of the same values about customers and how important it is to optimize for customers and how high standards they need to be, given how easy it is for people to switch and the importance of invention and speed. And so, I just feel very lucky to have had the chance to work so closely with him.
So is your relation, I mean, he was your only boss for 25 years, right? Is
20.
your relationship fundamentally different than it was when you were the head of AWS?
Yeah, of course.
And how?
Every single job you have, the relationship's different. Remember the first couple of years I worked for Jeff, I worked as what we called a shadow then, which is really like a chief of staff. And that was different than when I was starting AWS, which was different from when we got AWS going, and it was a business that was starting to do well. And it's different when I'm in the CEO role. But the constant has always been that we have a great relationship and we collaborate really well.
Amazon is poised to become the biggest private sector employer in the world. Second only, right now Walmart is in that spot, but Amazon will probably soon surpass it. First vote to unionize at an Amazon warehouse. I know you've been spending a lot of time at warehouses. When you look at someone like Chris Smalls, who I think some people look at as this modern day hero who got fired, pulled off this union vote, what's your message to someone like him? Your message to the folks who think maybe we should join a union?
Well, I think that the first thing to be clear about is that employees get to make that choice, whether they want to have a union or not. They always have had that choice, and it continues to be their choice. And we happen to think they're better off without a union for a number of reasons, including the fact that it's much harder when you have a union to have a direct relationship with your manager and to get things done quickly. So if you see something on the line that you think could be better for your team or you or your customers, you can't just go to your manager and say, let's change this. There's a whole process and bureaucracy that you have to go through to be able to do that. And we get, when there's a union, we're going to get the feedback filtered by what the union decides is worth bringing up. And we'd much rather hear from every employee whatever is on their mind. And so, I think if you want to continue to have the structure that we've had for all this time, you have to have really competitive benefits. And then I think if you look at Amazon's, they're very unusual in this space. We championed the $15 minimum wage several years ago. The starting salary is now over $18 an hour, which is more than double the federal minimum wage. You get full health insurance and 401k and up to 20 weeks of parental leave. And if you want to get a college education, you haven't had one, we have a career choice program that lets our fulfillment center associates be able to do so. That is a very unusual and compelling set of benefits, and those were all accomplished without a union. So, I think that we realize that we have to continue to work on the relationship with our employees, and we need to continue to provide the right benefits, and we need to continue to work on safety, and that's our intention.
You made a huge mark on Amazon with AWS, obviously. What is the mark that you want to make still? The FTC has revamped its antitrust inquiry into Amazon, and by some accounts is accelerating it. Are you preparing for an antitrust lawsuit from the FTC?
If you are a large company that's growing to a significant extent like we have, you have to be prepared to be scrutinized. And we have known this for some time, many years. And we have tried to run the company with that in mind and knowing that if somebody looked, that we would stand up to that scrutiny. And I think that's what we've tried to do in running the business. We can't control what, whether organizations bring different suits against us. But I think if you look at our business, if you actually look at the fact, if you take out of the equation that there may not be the most objective, leadership when it comes to Amazon in that organization. If you look at the facts, in our retail business, we're about 1% of the worldwide retail market segment share. And remember, 85% of it is still offline. And if you look in our AWS business, we, depending how you measure it, 95% of the worldwide global IT spend is on premises. And then we have a cloud business, and then we have a portion of that. We have a leading market segment share in the cloud part of this, but we operate, who we compete with in AWS is really on premises IT in addition to the cloud. So, these are relatively small percentages of the entire pie, and you can kind of step through all the businesses. And I think simply because you've been successful in a few different businesses doesn't somehow mean that you have unnatural market power. It just means you've been successful in a couple different customer experiences, but we still have a relatively small amount of market segment share in those areas.
What about the SEC? You're being sued by them over third-party data and how you've used it. Do you think in the past Amazon made mistakes with letting employees internally see how those third-party sellers were doing?
Well, we have pretty good control. I mean, we of course disagree with the premise of that, but I would say that we have very good controls with respect to the data that different employee sets are able to see. And by the way, I think that we can be better for sellers. I think that we can have better tools for them to get started. We can have better tools for them to manage what they're doing across their different Amazon units. I think we can communicate better. There's a whole bunch of things we can do better. And we agonize over every single email or communication we get from sellers. And we do very regularly robust surveying. And a lot more sellers are happy with Amazon than unhappy with Amazon. And I think if you look at what they're able to do is, as a business, by virtue of selling on Amazon versus not, it completely changes what's possible. Sellers don't really long for e-commerce software. That exists in lots of places, and it's not very expensive. What they love about selling on Amazon is that they get access to our hundreds of millions of customers, and that completely changes what their prospects can be in terms of the businesses they're building. So we have a lot of work to do there like we do in a lot of other places, but I think we have a very strong partnership with sellers.
What's the view of the supply chain right now and how much pain there is going to continue to be and for how long?
Well, I think that there's a lot of challenges in the supply chain still. I mean, it's gotten better than it was, but there are all sorts of challenges. Non-perishable goods, electronics, chips is still a really a significant issue for all sorts of businesses. We have worked really hard to open a lot more points of presence and ports and to increase our capacity in getting products in. But I think it's going to be something that companies battle with for some time. You
made a huge mark on Amazon with AWS, obviously. What is the mark that you want to make still on Amazon? I mean, in this new role, what's going to define the Andy Jassy era?
Well, I don't really think of it that way, Emily. I mean, I don't think it's really about an Andy Jassy era or any one person. And by the way, AWS was not about any one person. That if you've spent any time on AWS, that is an unbelievable team, not just an incredible leadership team, which it is, but just top to bottom, the number of inventors and people who care about customers and operate, something where it has to work almost like a dial tone. It's always teams. And so I look at every single one of our businesses and, take our retail business or our consumer business, which is the oldest of our businesses, 85% of it still lives offline. I think we have a lot of upside and a lot of growth. And I think as much invention as we've seen the last 25 years, the time I've been there, I think that it's going to look small compared to the next 25 years. There is a lot for us to invent on behalf of customers. And so, I'm excited to be part of the team that makes that happen. We are continuing to increase the amount that we give back to the communities in which we have a big presence. And that really matters to me. I think we have a responsibility to do that. And so, it's a long journey that we're working on, but I'm excited to be part of it, and I hope to be part of it for a long time.
Well, thank you for joining us and telling us about the way the journey is going so far.
Thank you,
Andy Jassy, CEO of Amazon.